You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Oh yeah, baby, that's lovely.
Good morning, it's May the 1st, and welcome to the Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News. We're live here from the Legacy420.com news desk, and we're live at paceradio.net as well as at cbgtv.com. Good morning, Rev Kelly. How are you doing today?
So good. Happy May. Monday, May, first day of May.
That's right. Yes, May the 1st.
May the 1st.
New month, fifth month of the year. We're almost halfway done. A little bit more to go.
Yeah, we are. Well, we're going to be closer to summer. I want the summer to come.
Yes. Well, by the looks of it, this week it's more of feeling like an Amazon rain jungle, I think. Rainforest.
Yeah. All weekend, all week.
all weekend. But, they say, well, it was April showers bring May flowers.
Yeah, the flowers are coming, but we just want to get
flowers are coming. Grass is getting green.
Yeah.
Exactly. Two things before we get into the news.
Okay.
Cannabis Temple yesterday.
So good. So nice to see everybody. Thank you for coming out and participating with Mr. Squishy again. You're saying you had some good conversations. We saw some.
Yes, we had some good conversations like we always do, filling people in on the process and way, how the rosin is done and so on and so forth. So, and, the importance of having it humid, like not too much moisture, but about 62%, if you can check on that.
Yeah.
That's a sweet spot for it.
So important.
Something that's too dry, crumbly, it doesn't do the trick.
It doesn't work. We had a joint rolling contest this time. That was fun.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
We did that differently, and we collected shoes for the vulnerable populations. So it's just nice, a community event, Cannabis Temple, every last Sunday of every month.
Yeah, well, it is exactly, and it makes for a good time. We've always enjoyed going there. So,
thanks for coming.
And the next thing I want to mention is this Saturday, as in the past for several years before COVID, I'm going to say probably close to about 25 years before COVID, the Global Marijuana March is coming to Toronto. I'm not seeing as much promotion as I did in the past, but I am seeing some. And I know that people are planning on meeting there. And if it, maybe there won't be the 50,000 people that were there in the past, but, even the 50,000 people had to start with a much smaller crowd before it got to that point.
That's right. And we still march. We march because there's still changes that need to be made, and we still need to support. There's still people in prison. There's still a lot of things that need to be helped for cannabis. So it's really good to keep coming and keep speaking about it, advocating.
Exactly. And I'm going to start. That's a good segue into our first story, that why these marches are so important and for people to speak up, that is because a continuation of last week's first story of the day, and that is Singapore executes man for helping buy 2 pounds of cannabis.
It's in Hong Kong.
Week we reported that the guy could be hung. Now we're reporting that he has been hung.
Last Wednesday, they executed a man accused of coordinating a cannabis delivery, despite pleas for clemency from his family and protests from activists that he was convicted on weak evidence.
Yeah, this fellow we've named Tang because his name's too big. But Tang was he was 46. He was sentenced to death in 2018 for abetting the trafficking of 1 kilogram, which is about 2.2 pounds of cannabis. And under Singapore laws, trafficking more than 500 grams of cannabis may result in the death penalty.
Now, Tang was hanged Wednesday morning, and his family was given the death certificate, according to a tweet from activist Kristen Hand of the Transformative Justice Collective, which advocates for abolishing the death penalty in Singapore.
Although Tang was not caught with cannabis, didn't handle it. Prosecutors said phone numbers traced him as the person responsible for coordinating the delivery of the cannabis. Tang had maintained that he was not the one communicating with the others connected to the case.
At a United Nations human rights briefing Tuesday, spokesperson Rabina Shamdasani called on the Singapore government to adopt a formal moratorium on executions for drug-related offenses.
Imposing the death penalty for drug offenses is incompatible with international norms and standards, she said, who added that increasing evidence shows that the death penalty is ineffective as a deterrent.
Well, Singapore's authorities say there is a deterrent effect, citing studies that traffickers carry amounts below the threshold that would bring a death penalty. So because they carry less, that's deterring them.
Yeah. Wow. The island state's imposition of the death penalty for drugs is in contrast with their neighbors. In Thailand, cannabis has essentially been legalized, and
Yeah.
Malaysia has ended the mandatory death penalty for serious crimes.
Wonderful. Well, Singapore executed 11 people last year for drug offenses. 11 people. Do you know where I'm never
11.
going in the world, Al? It will not. I'll never go to Singapore. Could you imagine going to Singapore? What it would be like there? 11
Yeah,
people executed for drug
executed.
offenses.
Yeah, and one of those cases involved a Malaysian man whose lawyer said he was mentally disabled.
Yep, that was in the news. That made news.
Yeah,
Mentally unwell to make choices and decisions properly, and hung for it. What?
correct. Yeah, exactly.
So this is a continued conversation, and again, like Al's saying, Marijuana Global March. What is the title that you're going to Saturday, Al?
Global Marijuana March,
Global Marijuana
GMM.
March. Yeah,
Correct. Yeah, it's the first Saturday of May every year.
every year.
Yeah. Now they say that the continued use of the death penalty by Singaporean government is the act of flagrant disregard for international human rights norms and cast aspersion on the legacy of Singapore's criminal justice system. Legitimacy. Boy, I'm getting the words mixed up today.
The legitimacy. Sorry, I lost where we were.
Yeah, relatives.
You have to continue.
Okay, relatives and activists have sent letters to Singapore's president, Yaacob, to plead for clemency. In a video posted by the Transformation Justice Collective, Tang's niece and nephew appealed to the public to raise concerns to the government over Tang's impending execution.
Now, an application was filed by Tang this past Monday for a stay on execution, dismissed without even a hearing the day before he was executed. Dismissed.
Wow. Now, according to Maya Foya, a director of nonprofit human rights organization Reprieve, says that Singapore claims it affords peoples on death row due process. But in reality, fair trial violations and capital punishment cases are the norm. Defendants are being left without legal representation when faced with imminent execution, as lawyers who take such cases are intimidated and harassed.
Right. Critics say Singapore's death penalty has mostly snared low-level mules and done little to stop drug traffickers and organized syndicates. But Singapore's government says that all those executed have been accorded full due process under the law, and the death penalty is necessary to protect its citizens. What?
Yeah. Wow. That is just, and people say, why do we still need to protest?
That's just
I-
11 in the last year. 11 people
11.
I mean, they didn't say it was all cannabis. They're calling cannabis a drug here and clumping it all together, but it sounds like it is what they're saying in the rest of the
Yeah.
article.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. If they're actually people, then yeah.
Wow.
It's
We
just
forget sometimes
wrong.
our privilege
So
over
wrong.
here.
People should
And
not be dying and getting hung.
No. Wow.
Yeah. And as they mentioned, their neighbors are all supportive. And we're going to get into the story after the break from one of their neighbors.
Yeah.
All right. On to the next story. Here we go. Headline said, Canada rooted in racism. A few pot pardons don't cut it, and I completely agree. No, a few pot pardons
Right.
don't cut it whatsoever.
It was 2015 and Justin Trudeau had
Go
just
ahead.
been elected. Canada's new prime minister was pledging to make good on a 2014 promise that came out of the blue and stunned his principal secretary, who was at the other end of the country at a Nova Scotia dinner while Trudeau was in British Columbia beginning the quest to legalize adult use cannabis in Canada.
This was a time for self-described progressive government to break new ground in social justice and use legalization to begin to correct past wrongs. It began that way, or rather, couched in those terms, it ended differently.
Canada's cannabis legalization has been a success on many levels. A Deloitte study estimated the legal industry has generated 11 billion Canadian dollars in its first 3 years, added 43.5 billion to Canada's gross domestic product, and created 98,000 jobs. It also said the industry needed greater diversity. It does, but those numbers are staggering to say them like
Yeah.
that.
11 billion, 43 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. At its heart, we believe the Canadian legalization has squandered an opportunity. A potential R towards social justice became instead a functional anodyne piece of legislation that missed a chance to expunge records rooted in past racism, provide a new social equity framework, and give back to communities that have been disproportionately harmed by a war on drugs in which Canada has been an enthusiastic participant.
Absolutely. It meant that the moment when adult use cannabis was legalized in Canada, and a year later, when a companion bill offering an inadequate pardon process became law, Canada had fallen behind US states that had tied legalization efforts to make good on promises to reverse racial injustice during the war on drugs. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. The original Trudeau cannabis promise may have caught many off guard and was initially dismissed by many as the musings of a rookie third-party leader with little prospect of immediate electoral success. But it should not have been seen as something so stunning. It was also not particularly brave, like the U.S. Public support for legalized cannabis has been on an upward trajectory in Canada for years. The only votes Trudeau was likely to lose with this initiative were those never headed his way anyways.
Mhm. Trudeau's move was merely the next logical step after many tentative decriminalization or legalization moves in Canada. The years of prohibition were rooted in racism, predominantly anti Asian racism. But an early progressive commission report led by Justice Gerald Ledane did not study potential cannabis legalization through any racism prism. The commission was established by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau largely because of an exploitation of cannabis use and drug experimentation among Canada's youth in 1969. So that was the root of it.
Yeah, yeah. So what happened back then? In its final 1972 final report, the Ledane Commission recommended the legalization of simple cannabis possession and cultivation for personal use. It recommended that people addicted to drugs be afforded greater opportunities for treatment rather than dealt with the heavy hand of the justice system. Kelly,
Yep.
50 years later,
Right.
we're still dealing with it.
Right. Right. It's not criminal, it's a health issue.
Yeah.
Ledane had two allies to create the majority opinion of the 5-member commission, but one of the remaining two felt it did not go far enough. Marie Andre Bertrand, a Quebec feminist and perhaps not coincidentally a Berkeley grad, recommended the government take over jurisdiction as it had for alcohol, a view that was in some provinces 46 years ahead of its time.
But the country was not ready for Ledane. His report came under heavy criticism in the media of all partisan stripes and from the health authorities of the day, including the Canadian Medical Association.
Given the danger that the report would be too hot for his government to handle, Pierre Trudeau ignored it and quietly kicked it to the
Mm.
curb. In a determination that would become a recurring trend, it was decided that there was no votes in moving forward with any of Ledain's recommendations 50 years
Yeah,
ago.
and over the ensuing years, tepid moves to decriminalize died, with government mandates that came to crashing halt during the years of Stephen Harper's conservative government. Wonder what happens next time. But by 2012, with the federal Liberals still stumbling in the opposition wilderness, the party voted by an overwhelming 77% to call on future Liberal governments to legalize, regulate, and tax cannabis production, distribution, and use. And it also called for the amnesty of Canadians with past possession convictions.
Justin Trudeau was listening a year later. He was chosen party leader in a landslide, and a few months later, he and his wife, Sylvie Gregoire, embarked on a trip through Western Canada. At a town hall-style picnic in Kelowna, BC, Trudeau, then the third party leader, announced he was going to legalize cannabis when elected. Never mind that he wasn't seen, at least in the eyes of the country's pundit, I don't know that word, as a likely prime minister in the short term.
Yeah, exactly. He's the third party leader, right?
Yeah. But he said
He
it.
did it. Yeah, according to his principal secretary, or his former principal secretary, Gerald Butts, he recalls that he said,
Uh-oh. Are you frozen, my friend? Am I frozen? I think. Are you okay?
Now it's
Okay.
yeah.
We're having a little Wi-Fi issues, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Are we? Yeah, I
Yes.
don't see that screen. Okay, I'm down by Trudeau had told Butts.
About his late brother Michael being busted for cannabis possession after smashing up his car on a trip home to Ontario from the West Coast. Police had found a couple of joints in the wreckage, and the family used its name and the connections only a former prime minister could boast to make Michael's problems disappear.
It was a story Trudeau would repeat publicly. Trudeau said that he had his brother had been an Indigenous kid. Well, had his brother been an Indigenous kid, he would have been in jail, and he was right. It sounded like he was building the foundation for a legalized cannabis regime rooted in social justice and a progressive Canadian government, and would undo much of the damage to the Black and Indigenous Canadians from the war on drugs.
But as legalized cannabis loomed, a cabinet trio of Public Safety Minister Ralph Goodale, Health Minister Jeanette Philpott, and Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould proved an impenetrable threesome when it came to using cannabis legalization as a springboard to greater social and cultural reforms. Bill Blair, the former Toronto police chief, was thrown into the mix as the law and order guy selling the legislation to the provinces and Canadians at large. I'm loving how this story is written, Al. this is a very interesting perspective, but it's the truth. It's what happened.
It's what happened. Why would the government gradually go from social justice rhetoric to its mantra of protecting children and busting the illegal market? Why would it not go further? Exactly.
Now, surely the nation's first Indigenous Justice Minister would be aware of the injustice done to Indigenous youth for the years during the war on drugs. Wouldn't she be advocating for putting cannabis reviews towards improving the life of Indigenous kids in urban settings, or pushing for guaranteed access to positions of power in the legal market for Indigenous entrepreneurs?
Yeah. Philpott worked assiduously to provide clean drinking water to Indigenous communities, but she did not push to right the criminal injustice perpetrated on Indigenous people convicted of cannabis possession. Blair knew the damage done to Black people in Toronto, but cannabis busts better than anyone.
Of course.
And he would.
Those of us advocating for expungement did get quick pushback, but part of that was simply the records were not as accessible as fully digitized US jurisdictions where you could get an algorithm loose on them.
And in Canada, convictions under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act do not specify cannabis, and there are no codes specifically for cannabis. So records would have to be assessed one by one. It was going to be very intensive work to go through all these records and identify the Canadians' convictions and downgrade or clear them, but it was very labor intensive to create these records in the first place.
Of course. People had to be arrested, then they had to be charged, then they had to be convicted. We poured massive resources into to criminalization that harms these people and harms the society, and think it's reasonable that we pour resources into clearing those records for them. What a call to action.
Yeah. And in June of 2019, the government passed legislation expediting record suspensions for Canadians with cannabis possession convictions. The onus was on the person seeking the suspension. It was an exercise in bureaucratic frustration and applied only to those with possession convictions and no other offense. Some estimates suggest there are up to 500,000 Canadians with cannabis possession convictions, but as of October of 2021, 2 years after the program was introduced, only 484
Wow.
had been granted.
Wow.
Yeah. 500,000, you got 484.
Less than 500 of 500,000.
Yeah.
Oh, Al. It took 3 more years for the government, responding to NDP pressure, to introduce and pass legislation that aims to sequester cannabis and other drug possession convictions by 2024, meaning they will not appear on criminal record checks. It still falls short of expungement.
Yeah. Canada's Cannabis Act is now under mandated review. There may be government willingness to move on our 3 goals of cannabis justice: inclusion of those hurt by the war on drugs, particularly unrepresented racial groups in the employment and economic opportunities in the legal industry, full amnesty for those with cannabis convictions, and reinvestment of the cannabis taxes into equity programs.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great article.
That's one thing that we've been saying over and over and over again is down in the U.S., it's written right into the laws.
Yep.
And people are, those things are going out.
Mm-hmm.
But, here in Canada, that's not happening. And, they explain some of it there.
Yeah.
But, they would
Where's
put
all that
those
tax money going then?
Creating those things. Why not?
All that tax money from all those billions of dollars that could go and help this. Jesus.
$11 billion that they've raised. So some of it goes to the provinces. 75% of it goes to the provinces. So, wow. All right, on to our next story. This one's from CTV News. The headline on it says, "Can psychedelics in Canada's mental health crisis?" One expert says yes, can aid.
It's a Burnaby, BC company that's forging ahead to give patients access to psychedelics, hoping that the substances can be used to help people with severe mental health issues.
The Filament Health co-founder Ben Lightburn believes working with Health Canada to understand the potential benefits of substances like MDMA and magic mushrooms could expand treatment options for those with mental health issues.
MDMA and psilocybin are hallucinogenics that can alter a person's senses, thinking, and emotions. According to Lightburn, Canada's reinstated access to the substance through special access program, allowing some Canadians with their doctor's approval to access drugs that haven't been approved for sale in the country.
It's important to remember that the patients that are eligible for this program are patients that have tried and failed every available treatment and are in serious or life-threatening conditions.
Yeah. Filament Health works with doctors and patients to give them access to psychedelic medicines by creating the drugs and distributing through the special access program.
Despite some people gaining access, Lightburn says formal approval of the drugs is still far away. Says that it's important to remember, even though it might seem like these are approved treatments and they're legal, they are still quite a long way away from being such.
Now, over the last several months, Health Canada has released guidelines pointing patients to clinical trials and how to access the substances through its program.
Lightburn says the government agency has strict guidelines on what patients can expect in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy programs.
Right. He's saying that, for instance, you need to have 2 therapists present in the room. There are common sense guidelines in order to protect patients' safety and guide them towards legal and appropriate access for these substances. It sounds like they're doing it in a really clinical way.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Health Canada tells CTV that it prepared to use all tools when addressing the mental health of Canadians. And the statement says that while psychedelics have shown promise, in some instances, further research is still needed. Gee, where do we hear that all the time?
Further research still needed. That's right.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just end that story right there.
Yeah.
Just so we can make up some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's there's more and more reports on that. On helping people.
Every
and
week.
It'd be great. It'd be great if something was done.
Yeah.
In order to help people, help patients.
Right. Yes.
All right. On to the next issue or story, I should say. This one comes to us from the Entrepreneur. It says Safe Banking Act reintroduced in Congress.
Bipartisan lawmakers in both chambers of Congress on Wednesday reintroduced the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act in an effort to normalize banking and financial services for the legal cannabis industry. It's sponsored by Senators Steve Daines and Jeff Merkley in the Senate and Republicans Earl Blumenauer and Dave Joyce in the House. The updated Safe Banking Act would protect banks and other institutions from federal prosecution for serving state legal cannabis companies.
Yeah. Under current federal law, banks are discouraged from providing services to state licensed cannabis companies due to the ongoing federal prohibition of cannabis. And the lack of banking has led to an industry based almost entirely on cash. The heightened levels of cash in cannabis remains valuable on the illicit market, has made state legal cannabis companies prime targets for criminals. Senator Merkley tweeted on Wednesday that the current system is dangerous and ripe for robbery, assaults, tax fraud, and money laundering. Can't argue with that.
The House of Representatives has previously approved the Safe Banking Act 7 times. 7?
7? 7? So this is the 8th time that it has gone before Congress.
As both a standalone proposal and as part of a broader legislation package. But the Senate has yet to ever formally consider the bill. This year's Senate version of the proposal, however, carries a total of 40 co-sponsors, including 5 Republicans. How can they keep turning it down? How?
I know. And the thing is, they need 60 votes in order for it to pass. That means that they require at least 9 or 10 Republicans to vote for it. And as you just read, there's only 5 that are co-sponsoring. So hopefully they can get those final required votes in order for it to pass. Yeah. They say the introduction of the Safe Banking Act puts us on a path to move through the Senate Banking Committee and get a vote on the floor of the Senate, says Senator Merkel and Daines in a joint statement issued after the proposal introduction.
And that statement says, we expect safe banking to go through the banking committee, and on the floor, there will be an opportunity to add additional regular order passed provisions, such as the HOPE and GRAM Acts. Before Senate passage, the expanded Safe Banking Plus package will represent the largest ever cannabis reform legislation with bipartisan support in Congress. We are committed to making 2023 the year a bill is signed into law that ensures illegal cannabis businesses have access to financial services they need. Wow, come on, guys.
Yeah,
so
come
hopeful.
on. Yeah, exactly. A 2022 poll for data for Progress found that 72% of U.S. voters, including nearly 2/3 of Republicans, support giving legal cannabis companies access to traditional financial services.
Wow.
They got the support.
I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to do it this time, Al.
I hope so.
No, eight times the charm.
Yeah, 8 times the charm. That's right. Yes, exactly. Oh, it's just crazy. 8 times.
They're going to do it this time.
Yeah,
this is it.
It just doesn't make sense.
It's Mexico.
Like they're putting all these people at risk, and it's just at the federal end.
It's true.
Like when you look around when you look around all the individual states, there's no problem there.
Nope.
With all those states having medical or legalization.
Yeah.
It just comes down to the federal government.
Right. And these
change
cannabis
the way that
businesses are making billions of dollars in cannabis, and they can't put them in a bank. Where are they keeping
Yeah.
their money? Where's they keeping their money, Alec? If they have to be a cash business, where are they keeping that millions or billions of dollars? Because they can't have a bank account. Like, they're just
Exactly.
somebody's mattress is full.
Not when it's legal. No, yeah. Who knows? Maybe they're forced to fake it through the banks, and that would be probably money laundering.
Right? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. On to our last story before we go to break. Headline here says Organigram takes Canadian government to court over cannabis lozenge dispute.
Just buzz through this one. Canadian cannabis operator Organigram Holdings is asking federal court to quash a Health Canada decision that the company's popular ingestible cannabis lozenges should be classified and regulated as edibles instead of extracts.
The legal challenge could have broader implications for Canada's regulated cannabis sector and affect millions of dollars in sales of high potency lozenges and similar products.
Like gum. They took the gum away too. Toronto
Did they?
headquarters Organigram is seeking an application for judicial review. In Canada, such reviews give stakeholders, including companies, the opportunity to challenge decisions by government authorities. That's explained Laura Renjeb Dillon.
Yeah. Dylan goes on to say that I think a lot of people in the industry will be waiting to see what the result of this is, because if Organigram is successful, I think that could lead to more challenges in the future.
Okay. They revealed that the court proceeding against Federal Health Department, they posted a quarterly result earlier this month and explained it.
Yeah, and the dispute between the cannabis company and Health Canada revolves around the regulatory classification of Organigram's Edison branded Jolts cannabis lozenges.
It was like 100 milligrams in the pack or something like that.
Correct. Yeah, each lozenge was 10 milligrams.
Right. So they want them to stay on the shelves, and they can't. They're saying here.
Yeah.
Other companies make similar products. It's in Diva Limited. They've successfully sold the lozenges as cannabis extract, and they have a higher THC limit. So they're saying others are doing it in a different way and getting away with it.
Yeah. Jolts were developed out of a growing and unmet customer need for a higher potency legal product that would be quality controlled, according to Goldenberg.
Right.
It says this.
Go ahead.
They say that this would offer consumers, including medical patients, an option for higher potency products that aren't inhalables for people who have difficulty swallowing capsules and for those who can't tolerate the mouthfeel of oils.
They're really thinking of that patient, that customer.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So there you go.
So there you go.
Yeah, in January, Health Canada put out a notice to let everybody know that, hey, these aren't right. So
taking them off the shelf.
It'd be interesting. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they win this battle.
Yeah.
So
we'll watch it.
All right, Kelly. Break time. Time to medicate Kelly now. I'll be right back after our session. You're watching Psychedelics and Cannabis Educational News here at paceradio.net and cbgtv.com. We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more. We've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Pace Radio is the people advocating cannabis education radio network.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com. CBGTV broadcasting to a worldwide audience. Find us at cbgtv.com.
Are you watching television on Roku, Fire, maybe an Apple TV or even Chromecast? If you are, then download the Boxcast app and search for CBGTV.
Did you know that the Pace Radio Network isn't just a radio network? That's right, because most, but not all of our programming is now done via video and is then podcasted at paceradio.net. So if you want to watch our programming, you'll find us on the Pace Radio Network's Facebook page. plus the show's own page, and you'll find us live on the network's YouTube channel. And don't forget, you can find it all, video and audio, at paceradio.net.
Legacy 420 have an awesome array of cannabis-infused beverages, from pop to Nature's Nectar's teas, all in amazing flavors. What a selection! We even have a delicious mango-infused juice, and let me tell you, it's delicious.
Everything is infused in-house, so we buy our syrup from, the same place where everybody else buys their syrup for their pop, and the infusion is done in the lab. It's all canned here, labeled here, produced 100% on Tyendinaga.
We have 2 lines of drinks. One is called our Nature's Nectar. That was our original line that we came out with. And then we also have a line under the Ready brand. We have them in 10 milligrams, 30 milligram, and 60 milligram cans.
What a great selection for a get-together with friends or after a long day. Remember, if you want to wet your whistle with on-site lab-tested products, come see your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net. And we're back for a medication session. All right, Rev Kelly, we started the program today with the hanging of the fellow in Singapore because of his cannabis conviction.
Yeah.
Now, Thailand is a country that is next door to Singapore.
Yeah.
And there, Thailand, Southeast Asia is weed wonderland.
Look at that photo. That is in Thailand right now. That is happening.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
A new symbol has appeared in the kaleidoscope jumble of neon signs that light up Sukhumvit Road, Bangkok's most international street. The sudden ubiquity of the 5-pointed cannabis leaf, a lurid green, announces the spectacular boom there that has been in weed-related businesses in Thailand since cannabis was decriminalized last June.
Yeah. Walk 2 kilometers east of the BBC office in Bangkok, and you pass more than 40 dispensaries selling potent cannabis flower buds and all the paraphernalia needed to smoke them.
Now travel in the opposite direction to the famous backpacker hangout of Kaosan Road, and there's an entire cannabis-themed shopping mall, Plantopia. Its shops half hidden behind the haze of smoke created by customers trying out the product. The website Weed in Thailand lists more than 4,000 businesses across the country selling cannabis and its derivatives. Wow.
Wow. Wow. Smoke created by customers trying out product. Wow.
Wow.
And this is Thailand. We're until
Singapore's neighbor.
Yes, exactly. Up until last June, you could get jailed for 5 years just for possessing it, and up to 15 years for producing it, where other drug offenses got the death penalty.
Oh my God.
They say the pace of change has been breathtaking. I guess so. From killing people to accepting it.
Wow. Let's see. It's messy, but then this is Thailand, and without this sudden liberalization, I don't think it would have happened at all, says Kitty Chubka, founder of Elevated Estate, a company that offers advice on the cannabis industry and has been part of the preliminary parliamentary committee trying to get the new regulations passed.
But this is the kind of liberalization long-term campaigners like her dreamed of. She says that we need regulation, spelling out what you can and cannot do. It is causing a lot of confusion, a lot of people not knowing what they can do and what they can put the money behind.
That makes sense. There she is. There was a great photo. There are some rules in this apparent free-for-all, but they're being enforced haphazardly, if at all. Not all dispensaries have a license, which they're required to have, and they're supposed to record the provenance of all their cannabis flowers and the personal details of every customer.
I don't like the personal details of every customer. No products aside from the unprocessed flower are supposed to have more than 0.2% THC.
Right.
Exactly. Nor can they be sold online. Yet you can find supplies offering potent cannabis brownies, and gummies with high THC content online with delivery to your door within an hour. Cannabis cannot be sold to anyone under 20 years of age, but who is to know if the product is simply delivered by a motorbike carrier?
Maybe the motorbike courier is under 20 years old too. Who knows?
Well, maybe that person would know to ask for ID, maybe, or
Sure.
if the regulation was put into there.
Right. It's a free for all. There are
Yeah.
restaurants serving cannabis laced dishes. You can get cannabis tea, cannabis ice cream. Convenience stores are even selling weed tinged drink water. The police have admitted they are so unsure of what it is and not legal. They are enforcing very few rules around cannabis. I want to go there now, Al. I'm going to Thailand. See ya.
The new cannabis regime is a bit of a political accident. Autan Charnavik, head of one of Thailand's larger political parties, made decriminalization part of his manifesto for the 2019 election. It proved a vote winner, mostly on the as yet untested notion that cannabis could be a profitable alternative cash crop for poor farmers. As health minister in the new government, Mr. Autan prioritized getting it taken off the banned narcotics list as soon as possible to fulfill his election pledge. Sounds like he's sort of similar to the way it started here.
Right. Thailand's parliament, a cauldron of competing interest groups, moves slowly. Cannabis was decriminalized before anyone had been able to write regulations to control the new business. And the planned new laws got bogged down by inter-party bickering. With another general election taking place in May, there's little chance of law getting through the parliament before the end of the year. Already, rival parties were warning of the dangers of unregulated weed and threatening to recriminalize if they take power. So if they get it wrong, they're going to take it back.
Yeah. The future of the freewheeling industry is uncertain. Tukta, a 21-year-old university student, jumped on the cannabis bandwagon last year, sinking more than $30,000 into a dispensary and coffee shop called the Herb Club in Bangkok's Klong Toi district. She sells 16 different grades of the cured flower, ranging from $10 to $80 a gram. Holy smokes. But she worries about possible changes in the law. With so much competition from the many other dispensaries nearby, she says business is neither good nor bad. $80 a gram? Holy smokes. Whew.
It's vacation weed. That's vacation prices. The price is falling because there's a glut of cannabis. There's a lot of illegal imports. We're growing strains from overseas, which need air conditioning and lighting. We should look into developing strains that work for our climate to lower costs. Absolutely, they should.
Well, it's the difference between indoor and outdoor as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Yeah, she says we really need to go back to our old heritage, our old cultures, because cannabis and Thailand are very interwoven with each other.
Yeah. That going back thousands of years. Many Thais who have grown up in a country which viewed all narcotics as dangerous social evil. The dramatic flowering of the cannabis business since last year is bewildering, yet the unforgiving official view of drugs is relatively recent development.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna change stories. We're running out of time.
Yeah, we are.
But it just shows the big difference between the two countries that are sitting side by side.
Yeah.
Sad.
Very sad.
Yeah. Well, here's some good news.
Oh, good.
All right. Yeah. Let's get that. Let's get that headline lined up. I got it off just by a bit. There we go. All right. The headline on it says, "This is from Entrepreneur. California awards $20 million in cannabis research grants." It's got to be good. $20 million.
Woo! California Department of Cannabis Control on Tuesday awarded $20 million in cannabis research grants to 16 academic institutes in the state. Rasha Salama, DCC Chief Deputy Director, said this studies funded by the grants will provide valuable insights on topics of interest to California's consumers, businesses, and policymakers.
Yep. 8 of the studies are focused on cannabis potency, 2 on medical cannabis use, 1 on the health of the state's cannabis industry, 2 on the monopolies and unfair competition, one on California legacy cannabis genetics and genetic sequencing, one on licensed and unlicensed cannabis cultivation throughout the state, and one on cannabis cultivation among farmers.
Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles were awarded the most funds, more than $7 million, covering 6 projects, including evaluating synthetic and semi-synthetic cannabinoids. A comparative study of the effects of the concentrate use versus flower, interactions between Delta-9 THC and CBD, medical cannabis use practices, and state of medical cannabis in California, and assessing the health of the state cannabis program.
3 projects at the University of California were awarded about $2.5 million for the state, by the state. The studies will investigate monopolistic and unfair competition in the state's cannabis industry, the effects of licensed and unlicensed cannabis cultivation, and cannabis farming among farmers.
2 projects in the University of California, San Diego were awarded about $1 million by the state. Those studies are focused on the effects of cannabis on young adults. Researchers at the University of California, San Francisco were awarded just under $100,000, or sorry, under $1 million for a study also focused on the effects of cannabis use on young adults.
And the University of California, Irvine, was awarded $2 million for a study on the short and long-term effects of high THC products.
Wow.
Researchers at the University of California's Davis was awarded $856,000 for a study focused on vaping cannabinoids.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Just vaping. That's brilliant.
Mhm.
A Cal Poly Humboldt project was awarded $2.7 million to study legacy California cannabis genetics, and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo was awarded $444,000 to study the state's cannabis regulations.
Yeah, in all, 98 proposals were received, and the accepted studies were chosen based on their strong scientific methodology, their ability to provide useful information for policymaking, their advancement of public understanding of cannabis, and their potential to generate fundamental research that will support exponential future knowledge.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the results of those studies.
Some of the results of these.
Yeah, that's
especially
exciting.
I'm interested on the high THC results.
Yeah, yeah. Cool.
Because people were always going at, the effects, saying that the effects of high THC isn't the best thing to do. So,
Right.
All right. And this next story comes along on your topic. And this one is, there we go. Cannabis tourism in Michigan is a real thing. Here's what to know and where to stay.
Yeah, Michigan has a strong cannabis community there. As people start to make their summer travel plans, there's a growing number of options for travelers to Michigan to consume cannabis on vacation, from cannabis music festivals to consumption lounges, and cannabis-friendly lodging.
Yeah, while the number and variety of options available to travelers since cannabis became legal in 2018 are increasing, the cannabis travel industry is still at its early days.
Now, there's no pure Michigan commercials advertising cannabis tourism in the state. Recreational cannabis sales began in Detroit at the start of this year, but Visit Detroit is just starting to explore its strategy around cannabis and tourism. That comes from a spokesperson.
One popular town in Michigan for tourists, Traverse City, recently issued 16 licenses for recreational cannabis. While recreational cannabis will be available for purchase in Traverse City this summer travel season, that doesn't mean the city's Visitors Bureau is rushing to promote it, mainly due to the restrictions on where it can be consumed. Whitney Ware, Chief Operating Officer of Traverse Tourism, says.
And she says it's a great place to come for anybody, and I can see it being aligned with what might be the cannabis consumer might be looking for. That said, we're just not at the point yet where we're ready to promote that kind of trip.
Yeah. However, there are a few cannabis companies and entrepreneurs that have filled in this gap, offering guides for travelers, aggregating cannabis-friendly activities and lodging options. This year, they say there are more options for cannabis travelers than ever before.
Yes. Andrew McFarlane, founder of Michigan Cannabis Trail, a website that offers information about cannabis experience in Michigan, said it's been a slow rollout. He started the website with hopes of making cannabis more mainstream. Now he says he wants to show consumers that cannabis can be safe and enjoyable.
Yeah, McFarlane was one of the people behind the Lilana wine trail. Sees parallels with cannabis. Wine was seen as snobby and inaccessible, and the industry had to find ways to make it more approachable.
Mm-hmm. The need for education in the cannabis industry is something that Northern Michigan cannabis retailer Dune Grass Company is betting on. A year ago, that retailer made the decision to really push the tourism aspect of the business, naming Brian Buchanan the director of tourism strategy for the company, rebranding the company Northern Michigan's Cannabis Outfitter. Good for them.
Good for them. Yeah, exactly. And I've lost where we were.
Just jumped a little bit ahead because I know we're running out of time.
Yeah. Okay. So, who can consume cannabis and how much in Michigan? Anyone 21 or older can possess up to 2.5 grams of cannabis, or ounces, of cannabis. However, public consumption, driving under the influence of it, is not allowed, obviously, and crossing state lines with cannabis isn't allowed. Consumers can't fly with cannabis, even though it's legal in Michigan, because marijuana is illegal at the state level and the air travel falls under federal law.
Jumping ahead a little bit, saying 30 listings for cannabis-friendly places to stay now exist on Michigan's Cannabis Trail, the highest options on since the website's founding. There's elevated experiences. You can go on the Drive Travel. You'll find the Nest accommodations, puff and paint, experience with local artists, and paraphernalia parties.
Yeah, exactly. So there's things to do going on down in Michigan,
Tons. Yeah.
tourism-wise, right? Yeah, so
And it even goes
that's
on
just
and
over
on.
their
So
border.
beautiful to see that. I was just thinking that, Al, if you go on, it continues talking about all of the different things out there, and it's very robust for the cannabis tourism industry and not far away from us. So I might have
That's
to take a
right.
drive down there this
Maybe,
summer.
maybe you have to just skip over the border there and check
I
things
think
out.
so.
All right, I wanted to make sure that we got to this story before we got to the end of the show. So, bit of a push to get to this point because you know it was it. I think it's sort of it's Willie Nelson's 90th birthday.
Yeah, celebrating time. From the moment the
Exactly.
2 days star-studded long story short, Willie Nelson 90 birthday bash at the Hollywood Bowl was announced, it promised to be once in a lifetime opportunity for the cross-generational cannabis crowd to convene and pay tribute to a longtime advocate for the herb.
Yeah, organizers seem to recognize this too, with plant-friendly performers including Snoop Dogg, Billy Strings on the bill, and not one but two different commemorative rolling trays on offer in the merchandise tent.
That's so cool. I'd like one of those trays. The confluence of weed-friendly folks, both on stage and off, at the historic open-air venue, which, having celebrated its centennial year, is barely a decade older than Nelson, seems like the perfect opportunity to check in with pot people who flocked to the bowl for the occasion. As the Times reporter focused on cannabis, they wanted to find out what they were firing up for the evening, what their go-to concert enhancements were, and what nuggets of wisdom they'd learned over the years.
Yeah, it's worth noting at the offset that technically cannabis smoking isn't permitted at the venue, and that's because of the Hollywood Bowl in LA Community Park or County Park, and therefore technically public is not private property, so you can't consume public. Yeah.
Do you think they did?
Probably. Who knows?
I'm
Who
gonna go look
knows?
for footage and see. I'm gonna go look for a video from it and see if anybody was. Surely, if Willie's performing, he's got to be smoking doobies there, right?
Yeah, it must be. Yeah, well, here you go. Next line. Inbound security checks on the first night of the 2-night event seemed unconcerned about weeding out combustible plant material, at least based on the personal experience of the people I pulled Saturday evening and afternoon were his results. However, he mentions that here because no one I spoke to as I wandered the bowl was willing to share their last name or show their face in a photograph. They all had a vested interest in being able to enjoy the second night of the 2-night extravaganza without being singled out for scrutiny. Also, more than a few cited the ongoing cannabis stigma as a reason for only giving their first names.
That's terrible. It's Willie Nelson's birthday, and they're scared to be
Willie
photographed.
Nelson's birthday.
Wow. Now, over the course of the evening, something became apparent to me, this is the author, although Nelson himself has reported stopping puffing pot, part of his legacy for the next 90 years, and no doubt beyond, will always be about bringing the cannabis community together. Consider the torch and the joint passed to the next generation. So he can no longer consume by combustion. So he must just use oils or topicals or edibles.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good. It's a huge story. And this is the bottom section is like interviews with people, stuff through there. So it was Willie's 90th birthday, and there was a song out there, I believe it was by Keith Irving and somebody else, that I'll never smoke weed with Willie again. And that is because they got so high with Willie. So I was looking for in this article where it said that the weed wisdom that the guy learned was that at his 90th birthday to learn, like as those guys did, never smoke weed with
Don't
Willie
smoke
again.
with Willie. That's neat.
Exactly.
That's good.
So, yeah, our last story that we were going to touch on, I'm not going to bring it up, and that was the fact that it was talking about 7 ways to use cannabis without smoking, and there were topicals, edibles, and it included vaporizing, which I was a little bit
which is a little bit easier.
That's odd because I thought, to
take, and less harsh for you
a little bit easier.
Combustion. And that might be another way that Willie smokes or Willie uses his cannabis. He might vaporize if he can't smoke anymore. I hear a lot of the old fellas that have been smoking for a long time say by the time they get to their 70s, 80s, they're saying, no, we're not, they can't smoke anymore. And that's okay. There's other options. That's right.
I know. I'll find out in a few years.
You got a long way to go.
All right. Well, other than that, anything you got to say before we go?
Oh, that's good. Good. See you next week.
All right. See you all next week. That's it for our news report for May the 1st. Thanks to our buzz at the Campbellford Lifestyle Shop and Legacy 420. And in closing, we'd like to say thank you for watching. Plus, don't forget to educate, medicate, and do not incarcerate. Don't hang people. Christ sakes. Wow. Bye-bye. You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
What do you find at paceradio.net? People advocating cannabis education.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com. CBG TV broadcasting to a worldwide audience. Find us at cbgtv.com.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.